Hello, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives, and welcome, Bill Taylor. It's good to have you back. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm okay. Now, I have to ask you. I have a couple of aliases from you already, but William Kittle the Fifth. Um, why and who? What does that mean?
That's just a name that I can remember. That was my middle school art teacher, and
Poor guy's probably getting a lot of nasty.
yeah, he's probably been gone a long time. He was pretty up there.
Oh, okay. Well, he's
But
safe.
you know how you need a theme to remember passwords and usernames.
Is that how it's done?
That's how I was inspired by some of the names near my street are all Indian names: Huracan and Mohican and Mohawk.
Uh-huh.
So the name, the Indian names or Native American, if we want to be politically correct, section of town. So I decided I would, since I do have a lot of different emails and usernames for different platforms, I decided my my usernames would be based on middle school teachers. So that's my art teacher, William Cattell.
All right. Thank you for that. The fifth, right?
Yeah, I think the fourth and the third were taken, so I made him the fifth.
Oh, I got you. All right. Well, more mysteries will be solved tonight with the great Bill Taylor.
Well,
What?
now they're gonna figure out my all my usernames from
Yeah,
going back into.
no, I'm not going to tell them. I'm not going to tell everybody the real secret their names. But what I did hear was that you were going to go out trick or treating tonight, dressed as Phil Murphy, and I thought, well, that's got to be entertaining. What's your costume going to look like?
Phil has not been looking too good lately, and it's not just the bias of the general dislike of Phil. He's growing his hair out a little bit. It's if you follow the New Jersey feeds on Twitter, there's a lot of comments about his appearance of dishevelment, and you wonder, there's some thought that he's under some sort of stress because he's see there goes that light.
Oh
Um,
no,
let's see. So that's not the right mode. Let's see if this one works.
no, not the blue. There,
Yeah,
there.
let's see if this works. Like I said, I don't know what's making it go on and off.
We had a tech rehearsal before the show, guys, so we've been trying to get the lights.
Let me see. One more. Let me see
Well,
if that one stays.
they're all, I just didn't like that blue one. That's all.
No, the blue one's not good. There's four softer
Oh,
versions.
all right,
Hopefully this one will stay.
we're good now. We're
Uh,
good.
that,
You know what that was? That was Phil Murphy
that is
pulling the
filming.
plug on us.
All right, I'm just going to turn it back on when it goes off, and,
So,
and I'll buy a new one for next time. But Phil does not look like he's enjoying life right now, even though he's the governor of New Jersey. We think he's under a decent amount of stress.
uh-huh.
Um, I,
Well, that's a pretty stressful job, really.
yeah.
I mean,
Now I'm just getting annoyed.
Ministry of
But
New
you know
Jersey.
what works? The blue one works the best.
All
I
right,
mean,
we'll go with it's
but Phil, as I mentioned before, Phil comes from a very deep state family. At least the wife does.
yeah,
Um, you know,
Snyder.
Snyder is definitely
Yeah.
um, deep state royalty. You know what? I'm not going to deal with the light.
All right, all right.
I
We'll
just that's what you
just
get
keep,
from the
just keep
$5.
smiling. We'll know where you are from
Yeah.
from your teeth.
Um,
No,
but yeah,
well, I was going to ask you a different question, though. I see that the Atlantic magazine, has on its cover the proposal that we should all just forgive and forget about the pandemic. We shouldn't have to point fingers at people, recriminations. Hey, mistakes were made. Eggs were cracked. Omelets were made, but let's just let it all go. Let bygones be bygones and forget about it. Wow, that really hit me. I thought, "Oh, no, here we go. Now the next thing is gonna be, just forget about it,
Yeah.
those 2.5 years that you endured, just forget about it, move on." You have a lot of personal involvement in this, so-called pandemic. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think it's a sign of panic. I think it's a sign they're very nervous about what happens when there's a change of control in Congress, or assuming there's a change of control.
Mhm.
Um, you're going to have hearings, or ideally this is all hoped for. But if they're worried, then maybe there is a decent amount of hope that there will be hearings. They're going to put people like Fauci on the stand. Uh, there's even talk that the Republicans take over New Jersey. Now, one of my tweets today was, if the Republicans do take control of the House, of the lower house in Jersey, or even the Senate, or possibly even both, they're going to debate what the state song should be for the first 6 months of their new power grab, and then they'll maybe get around to asking questions about the COVID lockdowns and the procedures uh, that wrecked a lot of lives. In New Jersey in particular, Murphy um, put COVID patients in in the nursing homes by executive order in April of 2020, and that killed a lot of people. Estimates from 10,000 to 14,000 people uh, caught COVID and died in these nursing homes. So when I say that Phil Murphy's not looking all that good, he's looking disheveled. He does like the Johnny Walker, and I would not be surprised if is seriously wondering what his fate will be, because I think the hammer's going to if the Republicans have any fortitude, and probably most of them don't, but I'm sure, but a few of them do, then they will start asking some very tough questions, and Twitter helps a lot because it gets those questions out there when the media is not willing to even consider asking or disseminating uncomfortable narratives.
Well, folks, if you're not aware of it, Bill's Twitter is really fun to watch. He has some pretty interesting, I don't know, slightly twisted posts. Was that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, yeah, you can say that.
I mean, if you like a little bit of humor that kind of has a twist to it, and yeah, that's it. Yeah.
There's a point. There's a point. Peter Duke, he talks about the bad guys, the black hats, will engage in signal diffusion. You know, essentially, kind of flood a social media platform with nonsense, so that the actual truth gets buried within the nonsense. And I think we could be played on this side on the white hat side, of the anti deep state, anti globalist side as well, and just turn everything on its head. If it's absurd, if it sounds absurd what they say, just double down on the absurdity, and you kind of just neutralize their messages as well. So I say some twisted things, um, but it shifts a narrative into their court. I think it's at some level. Of course, I'm not. I don't have thousands and thousands of followers. I have about 1,600. Um, but if you can get them to defend and work against a narrative that is not going in their favor, then it's time that they're wasting instead of time that we're wasting.
Do you get them to engage at all? Is anybody?
Well, you certainly. I mean, you certainly do it on Reddit all the time. I mean, it's very easy on Reddit.
Oh, I'm not on Reddit, so I don't
Yeah,
see that.
and you just ask the question. And it's done humorously, and people who get it get it. People who don't engage, and then they become apoplectic, to a point. The way we would when we see these untruths being propagated, and feel like it's a call to action on our part, when really it's not a call to action. They're just trolling for the sake of diffusing an important truth. So I asked a question on Reddit a couple different times, that if there was any more MK Ultra victims in the Pelosi's basement. in all serious, and then people engage with very serious. You're just making stuff up. Like, well, I don't, maybe you don't answer them back. Well, yeah, of course I'm making up. But they will engage, and it gets a little head in their head that, okay, there's a narrative out there that Pelosi's are keeping MK Ultra victims in their basement, in addition to this wacky story that's going around already. And somebody will inevitably kind of follow that trail and fall for it. It's my own disinformation. They want to play disinformation games. Here's some disinformation for you. The Pelosi's have MK Ultra victims in their basement. Prove me wrong.
Almost as weird as the story I saw just before we started the show. It was one of the major news outlets. I can't remember which one, but the story is that prosecutors say, prosecutors say that the person breaking into the Pelosi house wanted to kneecap Nancy Pelosi.
Right.
And I thought to myself, wow. I mean, there's on the one hand, it sounds like some crazy person got an idea that they saw from a mafia movie, right? Oh,
Right.
I'm going to kneecap that guy. But on the other hand, there really is a mafia.
Yeah.
And there really are people that get into trouble with the mafia, especially people who make a lot of money off of deals involving their political lives and spouses. And somebody, if you don't pay what's the little 10% thing that you have to pay anyway, the VIG. Yeah, if you don't pay the VIG, then you get a visit.
Right.
I wonder if that's not a little more truth in that than the mainstream media might have meant to convey.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because I did do some more research, actual research and not disinformation type research on the Pelosi's and the and to a little bit on this DePape character. I mean, I would say, it would have been an unauthorized kneecap. You'd have to get some very high. You'd have to get some, the capo de capo to sign off on a kneecapping of the Pelosi's, and probably have a commission also sign off, because the Pelosi's are very high up in the mafia, in La Cosa Nostra, or at least they have been historically. Her father, D'Alessandro, mayor of Baltimore, was very tight with the mobsters. He used to hang out in hot springs, at the horse race track. There's all kinds of allegations that could be easily found just in the public FBI files about his associations with mob characters. But there's also looking at actual Pelosi himself and the Pelosi family. Paul Pelosi, he had a brother. He has a brother named Ronald. He had another brother who I believe was accidentally killed by Paul. I didn't go down that trail, but there's somebody will know. But the Pelosi's, the father of Paul, Giovanni or John, he was a wholesale. He owned a wholesale pharmaceutical distribution company, and it was on Mission Street in San Francisco. And this was back in the 30s, 40s, 50s. Probably into this. I think the father, the grandfather, he passed away, I think, in the 1970s. But that's a little bit of a red flag right there. Paul Pelosi went to Eastern prep schools. I come from a half Italian family. My mother's side is Italian, and there's nobody in her side of nobody on the Italian side of the family went to any prep schools.
Yeah,
it was we're I guess more bread and butter type Italians, and not necessarily the wealthy types who could.
Hey, you can go to Fordham, man.
That's where the Irish go. You can't go there.
Oh no! Come on now. I and I. We're all brothers. Hey. No, that's was my father's story too. He was the only Irish named person in Loomis, uh,
Okay.
and and similar. Well, so yeah, that there's so many of these unspoken cultural barriers that still exist, and certainly the mafia still exists. Certainly in Baltimore, a number of folks mentioned. Uh, who was it that suggested that the mafia in Baltimore was actually a Jewish run?
I had said that, there's some interesting. So if you start to look through the JFK files on the Mary Farrell website,
Hmm.
Mary Farrell is a sort of it's a private archive of everything related to the JFK assassination, plus all the sort of mafia, La Cosa Nostra files that had been collected by the FBI. Even if it's sort of peripherally related to JFK, there's a lot of information in there on the congressional hearings during the 1950s uh, into the mafia. There's a lot of files that get into the Watergate. So it's a good resource for finding names. So one of the names that pops up, looking for D'Alessandro in the files, a lot of his co-hoodlums of Italian distraction show up in the files. But there's an interesting story about a trip in say call it 1961 or 1962 of two Genovese sort of up and comers from Brooklyn go down and they decide to take over the Baltimore numbers racket. Okay, and it seems like they were under the impression that the Baltimore's numbers racket was controlled by a relatively small group of Italian mobsters, and they didn't have much muscle, and they thought that they could elbow their way in. It turns out when they get down there that the numbers racket and gambling rings were controlled by a gentleman named Julius Salisbury, who some sources call him a one of the few Jewish-made members of the Italian mafia. Other sources say that he's really the head of the Jewish mafia, and that the Jewish mafia controls Baltimore. And there's a couple of other instances of this Julius Salisbury sort of ruling the rackets in Baltimore, and the Italians are more of a secondary, maybe muscle role. They never have the clout or the power that you would see in New York City, where the Genovese and the other four families really rule things. And to that extent, it gets into some very interesting types of rackets that Baltimore is famous for. I had to look it up again, but I recalled that Baltimore was known as the heroin capital of the U.S. And
When
apparently,
when was that? When
there's, I saw an article just today that was relatively recent, within the past 10 years, I would say. Um, I'm sure. I think if somebody Googled heroin capital Baltimore, it'll pull up a couple different articles, or at least the one that I saw.
we're having bad luck with lights tonight. My light just went out. It's unbelievable. I wonder what's going on here. Oh, who knows? There we go. Oh,
So wait,
happy Halloween, everybody.
yeah,
The ghosts are active tonight, and
I'm gonna try one more time on mine. I spent $4 on this light.
oh man, hey, I'm gonna send you a light, man.
I will get my own light. I'll pay more. I'll go to Best Buy and
I'm
actually
not
get.
trying to shame you into getting a
No,
light now, Bill.
no,
Uh, well, excuse me. Okay, boo, everybody, and yeah, happy Halloween.
So just
Well,
back to Baltimore to Pelosi's. This is where it gets. Now this is where this will segue into the other areas we were going to go. Baltimore, heroin capital, right? Because it's a big port city. Um, one of D'Alessandro's or Pelosi's father's first benefactors was the McCormick, President McCormick, one of the McCormick brothers or sons who ran McCormick Spices, which is, you're getting spices from all over the world. Not going to say that they were importing very, very expensive spices from the Golden Triangle or anything, but they actually did. There's on my website. There's actually a picture of the they would bring the poppy seeds back and make this medicinal opium out of them. But Baltimore's history in the opium trade goes back to about 1814, and the first first American ship to pick up a load of heroin for the Far East was out of Baltimore.
Opium, right?
Yep, and it sailed to Smyrna, Turkey, which is famous for a lot of things. Picked up the heroin and took the westerly route to China for drop off in the opium trade. So it opened up a whole new market for the Baltimore Clippers.
Speaking of Irish names, wasn't that O'Donnell was the guy's name? I think it was O'Donnell, something like that. There was a park and a statue, and they recently took down the statue because he also happened to be a slave trader.
Well, yeah, because once slavery was illegal, what are you going to do with those ships?
Yeah, what are you going to do? I mean, come on, guys. I've got these beautiful Baltimore Clippers,
Yeah, yeah.
I just had up on the screen in case people wanted to see it. There's a website here, Mobtown Confidential. 30 years after his mysterious disappearance, gentleman racketeer and block kingpin. If you've been to Baltimore, you've heard of the Block. Julius the Lord Salisbury still haunts Baltimore. Motown Confidential, and yeah, this is a 2000 article, but yeah, it's. I say I didn't really see a lot of mafia influence, but all you had to do is drive along. I think it was East Baltimore Street at a certain, well, for all that whole era, and there was like the strip clubs, but also a lot of just who knows what's going on places. But this I never knew the name Julius Salisbury without an I, just Salsbury. Unlike his fictional alter ego, he was never caught.
Right. I think he escaped to Israel.
That's what it says. It says legend has it that he went to Israel to enjoy the protections afforded Jewish American criminals under the 1965 U.S.-Israeli extradition treaty. How convenient.
It is convenient. I think that's where Meyer Lansky was too.
Yeah. Okay. And there he is in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm rather surprised that anybody would want to take his picture. What? You're taking my picture?
He didn't have a choice in that picture.
All right. Enough for Julius. Thank you. Yeah, Baltimore. I didn't know it was the heroin capital, but it sure was famous for those clipper ships. And
right.
And that was, it's sad because I guess New Jersey had the same experience, but think of the War of 1812 and the Star Spangled Banner story and the whole idea of the militias coming together and converging there. After 2 years of war, the British came and were attacking Washington and Baltimore and up and down the Chesapeake Bay, burning towns and all that kinds of nice things, robbing churches, for instance, down this way. And, just to harass and give us a hard time and make life difficult for us. But, to burn Washington, for instance, and then they sailed up to Baltimore. But by the time they got to Baltimore, all the militias, within 200-300 miles had converged on Baltimore. I mean, somebody just sent out, to Pennsylvania, hey, the British are coming to Baltimore, come and help us. And everybody, gets on their horse, loads up their stuff and brings their gun and they go down there. And, by the time the British got there, there was something like 15,000 militia there in addition to the regular army. And they completely dominated both sides of the harbor all around. The British had no chance, and they ended up having to go back the way they came. And that was, I think, one of the peak moments of American patriotism, of people saying, "Oh my God, my fellow countrymen are being attacked by the British. I gotta go. I'm going. I'm riding to the sound of the guns."
Hmm.
And and then you know we had the terrible Civil War, and I don't I don't I don't know. It's happened all over the country, really. As I was reading this morning from Tony Chaikin's book about how the railroads got started. Well, it was a good thing. It was everybody working. You said, yeah, we need to get a railroad. So the federal government did what they could. The state governments did what they could. They'd get financing wherever they could. They would, the people and the government, and then they got the army to utilize their ability to make machinery and to forge the engines, the steam engines, and ultimately it was a national effort to build railroads from here to there so that we as a nation would grow. But then by the end of that same century, all the railroads are getting tied up into the hands of these financial behemoths that are sucking all the profit out of it. And what had started out as a very lucrative line of work for a young person to go into, i.e., studying locomotive engineering or geography or anything related to that. As this whole thing was growing, people got paid well. Until then, the corporations just came and take it all over, and then the next thing you know, California is full of Chinese immigrants that are working for slave wages, and the same thing happens with the Irish in the Midwest and the North, and other Eastern European groups also came in for that, and then exploited for the mines and everything else. But that's the trouble, is that we still have this mentality, at least I do, of the good guys that started America, and it has this great purpose, versus the reality of America, which by now has been subverted. It's not the founding fathers' dream. It is simply a playing field for capital, for people that have, a nice looking books of ledger of their accounts, that they can get big loans and do financial plays to make money off of making money instead of being productive. Um, this country is not productive anymore. It's now just turned into a financial circus for the people that, and God, this inflation that's now going to hit us with these printing all this money. It's just another reason to we have to I keep saying it, we have to get up, stand up, don't give up your rights. Do be a citizen, not a subject. Be a part of this, and not somebody that just goes along for the ride and looks out the window as you're going by, looking at all the scenery, but doesn't get engaged. Because the more people that get engaged, the less they can't do it. Um, that's my speech for tonight.
No, that's a good one. Oh, but I think people are increasingly more engaged. I mean, I was I was never I had an interest in politics up until you know 2016. I used to go on Free Republic in the 1990s and follow the machinations of the Clintons and their scandals, which seem pretty weak now. Um, but it was interesting to me in the conspiracies that sort of went along with the Clinton body count. But I never would have put the Clinton body count and JFK assassination and 9/11 and COVID all in the same pile, and attempted to make any connections. As far as I was concerned, the Clintons were just uh, just corrupt, and they got in on a during a weird election because Ross Perot kind of split the conservative vote. I thought George Bush the first was a relatively decent guy, if sort of a weak need. But I mean, 48 years old, 52 now. Listening to George Webb, listening to you, listening to all your guests. Everything we've been told in history class, and then and not just in 8th grade history, but also advanced history in college or history 601. It's been wrong. I mean, it's been manipulated. It's been covered up. I mean, it's difficult to find the truth, but the truth is out there. You really have to read a lot of books to figure it out what it is, and you have to do the primary research, I think, because even the books, I think, especially more popular ones, are suspect. But I'm willing to put the World War I and JFK and 9/11 and COVID all in the same, blame it on the same core group of nutcases. Even earlier than that, going back to the railroads. I mean, it's all the same names pop up all the time. I mean, you mentioned the railroads, and they're all financed by Rothschild agent banks. You have Kuhn Loeb is the famous, but there's also Seligman. There's also Erlanger. There's the J.P. Morgan was hijacked at some point. There's and the names just keep popping. The names pop up to the present.
Yeah, I've read this before, and it happens to be right laying here because I read it maybe 2 weeks ago. But let me just read this quick little paragraph. This is about Jacob Schiff. Jacob Schiff was the foremost Jewish leader from 1880 to 1920 in what later became known as the Schiff era. Schiff was also a strong supporter of Jewish causes and the Zionist movement, and helped establish and develop Hebrew Union College, the Jewish division of the New York Public Library, and the American Jewish Committee. Schiff showed his support for the cause of the Sabbateans when the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, at the head of which was Solomon Schechter, the Frankist and founder of the American Conservative Jewish Movement, whose mentor was Zechariah Frankel, also a Frankist, who was founded in 1901, and he provided it with an endowment of nearly $500,000 and a building. Today, JTSA operates 5 schools: the Albert A. List School of College of Jewish Studies, which is affiliated with Columbia University, the Graduate School, the William David Graduate School of Jewish Education, the H.L. Miller's Cantoral School, and the College of Jewish Music, and the Rabbinical School. Now, here's this stuff about the families and the banks. Schiff bought into Kuhn and Loeb, a well-known private banking firm. Shortly after he became a partner, he married Loeb's daughter, Teresa. Then he bought out Kuhn's interest and moved the firm to New York, where it became Kuhn, Loeb and Company, with Schiff, agent of the Rothschilds, ostensibly as sole owner. Edward Harriman held a monopoly over the railroads, which were all financed by Schiff at Kuhn, Loeb and Company. However, instead of monopolizing all the other industries for Kuhn, Loeb and Company, Schiff opened the doors of the House of Rothschild to bankers like J.P. Morgan. In turn, the Rothschilds arranged the setting up of London, Paris, European, and other branches for these bankers, but always in partnerships with Rothschild subordinates and with Jacob Schiff in New York as boss. So, and then, later on, it's Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller was tasked by the Rothschilds through their agents, John Jacob Astor and Jacob Schiff, to gain control of the American oil industry. So, so much of this goes back to Jacob Schiff, and then he's a Rothschild agent. It's incredible, but we're talking about a period of time, maybe 40, 50 years after America had done all the basic work of creating at least the Eastern and Midwestern railroads. And that again was a public works project to which everybody was in favor of it. But then along comes Jacob Schiff and the financing, and that, I think it was Albert Einstein that said that the greatest power in the universe is compound interest. And that's what happens. You get on a loan, and then you got to either pay the VIG or pay something else. But all of it means that the people that are running the financial system are so far ahead of the rest of us in what's supposed to be a level playing field that it really does just look like a rat race. That the rest of us are the rats, and they get to, you know, have all the cheese.
Right.
So it's a shame. It's a damn shame, and we got to. It's not just idealism to say that's what America's mission really was, because it really was, and it's a shame for anybody to walk away from it and say, oh well, you know, it's just not working. Forget it. You know, let it all fall down and let's start over, because we can't. You can't just start over.
No.
It, it'll be chaos for centuries, or at least for decades.
No, well, you see a lot of these robber barons, and you know, both the bankers and the industrialists. You know, they played a different game than the way business had been conducted for centuries. I mean, it became, you know, ideally in capitalism, you don't need any regulations or rules, you know, and your word is what, you know, deals are made over. But then they go out of bounds. You see this with you know, just unethical behaviors, whether it's business or just on a personal basis. And then the laws had to catch up to all this at some point. The story of Pepsi Cola is pretty interesting, but it was pretty typical of the day. Pepsi Cola was strong armed into bankruptcy in, I think, 1931 or 32. And a gentleman named Warren Grove from Norfolk, Virginia, who was a frontman for the Lansky Syndicate, who was a frontman for Bronfman's, who were working for the Rothschilds. You know, they would basically force these companies, these corporations, into bankruptcy. And this is before there's any really bankruptcy laws in the United States.
How would they do that? Just
I mean, you could just collude. You can collude with the competition, collude with the suppliers. You know, if you have the capital, you could say to United Sugar, do me a favor, make sure the sugar cart, you know, the load of sugar doesn't arrive for another 2 weeks when it's supposed to be there the next day. You know, and then you're quickly putting a company like Pepsi Cola underwater, or especially with the labor unions. You know, they would grab control of the labor unions, and so, you know, it's time for a strike. And then next thing you know, a Schiff type character, or Warren Grove type character, rather, because Schiff would have been above this. He wouldn't have played the game because he wouldn't want to get his fingers dirty. But Warren Grove would say, you know what? We know, we know you don't have the money to pay for your sugar, but we can give you the loan at 25%, and get you up and running again. But it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you 30% of the corporation. So they would all use all these strong arm tactics to take controls of corporations. It wasn't there's the 1940 Investment Vehicle Act, I think it's called. The 1940, the main law passed in 1940, Investment Company Act, I think it's called. Basically, you know, outlawed collusion between investment firms to take over a company. So you would think that would be normal, that would be a given, because there's rules in place now. Fidelity and BlackRock and Vanguard and Kemper and Putnam can't accumulate enough shares or collude to put a company under and take their equity. But before 1940, there was no rule against it. There was an unspoken rule against it because it was unfair, it was unethical, it was immoral. But there was no statutory rule against it that would keep investment companies from colluding to take over a company by essentially forcing them to take loans that they couldn't pay back. But it was pretty rampant. So you have these conditions that occur in business, and people will take advantage of the situation. They take advantage of it. Nobody says I can't do it, so I'm going to do it. Even though it remains unethical and it remains immoral.
That's one of the things I've always wanted somebody to just make a big announcement to say either A, everything is legal unless we say it's not legal,
Right.
or B, nothing is legal unless we say it is legal.
Yeah.
And I want to know which one it is. and
Yeah.
and I think there should be a big sign that says today, it's this way. We might switch it tomorrow, but today it's this way. I get so sick and tired of being flipped on those things. Hey,
It's actually a religious philosophy or a religious tenet of some sects, including Sabbateans and the Quakers and the Jesuits have been accused of it too. It's called antinomianism,
mhm,
where the antinomiists believe that if it's not explicitly, how do you say it? If it's not explicitly written in the Bible or part of the canon, then it's allowed. Okay. Now the Quakers took it to a direction which is enviable. They they use they use that position to argue against slavery. Right. The Bible doesn't specifically uh, condone slavery.
yeah,
Uh,
it does.
well, I mean, but the Protestants would accuse them of this. The Protestants who were for slavery. Anyway, there was a big, it was a moral conundrum for a lot of religious sects or a lot of mainline religions.
Yeah,
Whether slavery should be permitted or not, and the Quakers took it in the direction of, well, even if it doesn't say so in a Protestant church, doesn't mean it's not wrong. And the Jesuits were accused of the same thing in the 16th century, um, for selling penances and
indulgences.
indulgences.
You mentioned a little while ago about the tendency of a a family business or a wealth to get big, to get too big, and one of the and then the person that's being financed at some point will think, you know what, I'm big enough now. I can run things on my own, and I'm just gonna tell that nasty bank, they're gonna have to take what I can give them. That I'm gonna start telling them what to do, and I'm gonna run the show because I'm the guy that built this business, and blah 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 blah. And I that's when, of course, when the heavy guys come in. But what happens on a national level and an international level? Because this is what I my latest thinking on what's happened to China is kind of like this. Now, as you may know, China's having a big real estate crash right now, and there's all kinds of people looking at it, and it's it's troubling the Asian financial markets, and everybody's overextended, blah blah blah. But here's what I think the analysis that I follow runs like this. Kissinger, on behalf of the deep state, all of them guys, goes to China and makes a deal, and basically they say, we're gradually going to open up China, and we're gradually going to invest in China, and we're going to gradually let Chinese people, invest in America, and we're going to, it's all going to happen slowly, and it's all going to be very cool, and don't worry about it. But you know, the opening of China has now gotten to that point where China is standing up and saying, "Wait a minute, I don't need no U.S. economy anymore. I don't need those. I'm going to build my own economy. I'm going to hook up with Russia. I'm going to hook up with the BRICS. We're going to break free from the colonial overlords of Wall Street and London, and we're going to be, free China and free Asia, and the whole world will be reciting, wonderful poetry, and we're all going to be very, very happy, except for finally the United States will be pushed aside because we're going to do this thing." And so, why is the real estate market in China crashing, and why is the economy over there going bad? And the theory is that the American and British financiers started seeing that China was overtaking them in power. And as China starts standing up and being, like Xi is like, being sovereign, in other words, running a sovereign country. How dare you be sovereign? We're the ones that gave you the keys into the Western system. You have to be, subservient and loyal for another 200 years. And China's saying, no, we're ready to rock and roll right now on our own. So no, thank you, U.S. Well, that's what's happening. Is the U.S. is pulling out. They're taking all of their investment out of China and putting it somewhere else. So all those cities that they built and all those fast trains and everything are not going to be making anybody any money. In fact, they're just going to sit there because of the decision by the Americans and our financial system to, okay, Kissinger told you if you didn't play ball with us, we were going to take our ball and go home, and that's what we're doing. Um, that on a world stage, the same thing seems to be happening. The banks, said, here, we're going to help you out. We're going to pull you up out of the ghetto, but the price is everything you own is on a string, and we can pull it back
Mhm.
whenever we want to. Um, I don't know. I think that's just kind of the way of the world.
Well, I mean, I would argue right now what you're saying is sort of a realization that they have been under somebody's thumb, and now is the time to extract themselves.
Hmm.
I mean, I would suggest that I was a bit I've always been a defender of the Federal Reserve System. I mean, not here in these circles, but I never necessarily had a problem with the idea of printing money when it's needed for a variety, but for a variety of purposes, in that it past panics that this country had were due to a lack of liquidity. But that's a history and an economics lesson. It's boring. Um, but but that was under the assumption that the Federal Reserve was doing that specifically just to keep the economy going. They didn't have any nefarious intentions when doing it. Of course, they're going to get it wrong. They're going to print too much money at some point, and not enough money at another point. But the idea of printing money roughly in line with how fast the gross national product is growing, uh, I didn't see anything nefarious there. Now I'm convinced that the Federal Reserve, uh, has purposely taken actions. And this is only a realization in the past 4 years, and I was on Wall Street for 25 years. The Federal Reserve purposely prints money to deflate the currency and allow actual hard assets to be acquired by a very, very, very small amount of people. Natural resources, oil, gas, gold, silver, timber, a lot of timber. Um, in order with an end game in mind of implementing their New World Order nonsense and really subjugating the entire population. Now I think it's what I'm getting is I didn't think it was nefarious. I think they did it wrong sometimes, and you run into recessions and inflation like in the '70s. But now I think it's purposeful, and I was I would argue that the Chinese and the Russians now know that their whole economies uh, were the rate of growth in their economies and their access to the banks and liquidity was dependent on them playing a globalist game that really was for the benefit of a few, and not even that many in China, and probably hardly anybody in Russia would be the true beneficiary. Um, so you almost see like this multi. I mean, Putin has said it a couple of times. I think he said it just last week. He wants to be out from under the thumb of the central bankers. And if he didn't say Rothschild specifically, I believe he actually mentioned them specifically. Uh,
Interesting. That
and
sounds dangerous, really.
right, but it's a realization. Now, the thing about Russia, I think, is very interesting. They've been tortured for the past. We've had it pretty good here with our central bank system and our Federal Reserve. We didn't have 40 million people die in World War II. And we didn't have famines in the 1930s, and we didn't have an oppressive state up until the 1990s. I wouldn't be surprised if they're going through the archives, see how the hell did we get to this spot? I mean, what happened after the revolution? Why did what happened to all our natural resources that we had? How come nobody got rich off of this whole scam? I tweeted out a couple of weeks ago, the Russians know who killed JFK. If anybody knows, it's going to be them. They're going to know if we went to the moon or not. They're going to know. I'm sure they know who did 9/11. If they wanted to start playing hardball and sort of, from a national point of view, and they have very long memories, why find out what happened? How did we get to this point, and why did so many people have to die? To get here, who was behind this? And if you go back to the Bolshevik Revolution, it's the Schiffs. It is Jacob Schiff financing the whole thing. It's London bankers getting Trotsky on a train to Canada and then off to Russia.
And talk about things that we should have been told in school. This nobody knows that. I mean, I know it, you know it, but
Right.
a few hundred people that we know probably know it by now, but nobody generally knows that Jacob Schiff was a financier of the Bolshevik Revolution, and the whole Warburg finance, Daddy Warburg, Daddy Warbucks thing
Mm-hmm.
is real. And
Right.
they finance both sides of any war. It's just like you said earlier about it doesn't say you can't do it, so we'll do it. And once you get somebody thinking, well, if it's not forbidden that I do this, then somebody else is going to do it if I don't do it. And so you have to do it because you can't let them do it first. It's kind of like biological weapons.
Right.
If you think, and honestly, the CIA, the DARPA people really do operate on the principle that if the Russians can figure it out, then we have to figure it out, because we have to know what to do about when the Russians figure it out, when they make it, we have to have an antidote. So
Mm-hmm.
we've got to make it, and then we can figure out the antidote before they poison us with it. So that's why we have to make it. And it's ridiculous, and it's an incredible place to pour a whole lot of money. And boy, is all talk about, that's where the inflation is from. It's from all of these pharma purchases. What was it? The Ursula von der Leyen over in Europe bought 10 doses of vaccine for every person in Europe. There's 450 million people in Europe, so she bought like 4.5 billion doses
Right.
of that stuff. And Europeans are going to be paying that, for generations. What? How did we get here, and how are we going to get out of it? Well, I am delighted to welcome back to my show this Thursday Diane Sayre, who you've probably heard of, Bill. She's
Mm-hmm.
running for Senate against Chuck Schumer, and anybody that can take on Chuck Schumer, I'm just delighted to do whatever I can to support her. So she's going to be on my show on Thursday night, and that reminds me of where we started the show tonight, talking about people getting active. The LaRouche kids are out there, shouting down AOC, shouting
Mm-hmm.
down, the warmongers, and actually, acting like kids did in the '60s to confront the warmongers. And I'm proud of them. I'm so glad to see them. And the more that do it, the more of them feel empowered to do it themselves. So you're right. There is activism going on. Have you had a chance to look into Diane Sayre's campaign?
No, I haven't actually. And if you're running, Chuck Schumer, a lot of people don't know Chuck Schumer has an opponent. A lot of people have been concentrated in New York on the Zeldin Hochul race. So for governor,
Uh-huh.
Zeldin is Republican. He's challenging, and he's actually had some very impressive rallies. I mean, Long Island, there was one 2 nights ago, and you would think it was a Trump rally, and people are angry. So there's definitely a lot of momentum for ousting the incumbents, especially in these in these blue states, which suffered a lot. Suffered a lot during the whole lockdown and the whole COVID nonsense. Um,
What are
so
the
no,
what are the bellwether races that you're looking at?
there's a Congressman Malinkowski up in North Jersey, whose challenger is Thomas Keene Jr. Now, Keene is a little bit of a milquetoast himself, and he's got the family name, and he's a Republican. And most of the time, I would give him a hard time, but Malinkowski is just a swamp creature of the deepest kind. At the very least, Keene, who may or may not be a swamp creature, he's going to have to go along with the game, at least for the first couple votes or a couple months he's in. But Keene seems to be ahead. Fetterman in Pennsylvania. I'm sure you probably saw that from the Philly media around. Maybe you get some Philly media.
No, I don't get a
Yeah.
single bit out of Philly.
No.
I'm Philly clueless.
So Fetterman in Pennsylvania is going against Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz is also not the ideal candidate, but Fetterman is he's a disaster.
You know that guy on TV is running?
Yeah, I mean he's got Dr. Oz versus Fetterman. He looks like an ogre. He had a stroke too a couple months ago. This Fetterman character, so his he presents very poorly, and we're not supposed to make fun of him. But
I saw a picture of him and somebody saying exactly that. We're not going to make fun of this man because he.
I don't have a problem making fun of him.
No,
not at
well,
all.
that's because he's a swamp creature from the deep.
He just there's nothing charismatic about it. He could barely speak before he had his stroke. And he's wishy-washy. He can't. Dr. Oz is pretty polished, whatever his politics are.
Well, if you see, when you choose a name like Oz, you're making a reference to the Wizard of Oz, and which that is, of course, is a reference to Osiris and
Right.
and the Egyptian mystery religions. So I find the whole idea of wanting to have a career playing the role of Dr. Oz in and of itself is a little bit funny. Hi, I'm Dr. Osiris. Okay. Well, great. I had a lot of fun tonight. How
Yeah, it
about
was good. Very good.
Okay, everybody. Bill Taylor's blog is at Deep State News. And how do we spell that, Bill?
If you go to D State News, let's see. I'll give you the d-statenews.com. d-statenews.com.
All right.
Go to my Twitter handle and you can get to it from my profile.
On Twitter. Okay. Yeah. All right. Bill Taylor, a.k.a. William Cattell, the great artist of yesteryear. All right. And thank you. I'm glad to know you had, I guess I should have known you had a lot of Wall Street experience, but this opens up the possibilities to me. I'm going to get you and David Underdown together on a show. Is that all right?
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right. Okay. Well, looking forward to that. And don't forget tomorrow morning, my first interview with Dr. Dolores Cahill will be joining me from Ireland to discuss her whistleblowing efforts, the censorship she met as a doctor in early COVID time, and her efforts to try to reinvigorate sovereignty in the Republic of Ireland. So that ought to be a lot of fun. 11 a.m. tomorrow. Join us if you can. Bill Taylor, thanks again. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Good night.